we start, here's your quick spoiler warning for Persona 5 Royal, Baldur's Gate 3, and Arcane. You've been warned. Many, if not most, JRPGs have an element of killing God. Oftentimes, this is a tyrannical deity, a corrupt character who ascends to godhood or something close to it during the game's runtime, or a god who you hadn't known existed until the final third of the game, but whose existence is the final piece of an otherwise incomplete world-building. In killing this divine tyrant, the characters reach their quote-unquote good ending that resolves and answers the question the theme had initially posed. General themes surrounding this type of narrative focus on existentialism and the ability to create your own fate. Essentially, these types of stories tell the message that you are responsible for your own actions, and you should fight back against the forces that try to write your fate for you. So then, what happens when a character is able to become a god? Usually, this is reserved for antagonists and fallen, or, I suppose, risen heroes who go mad with power or otherwise go down a path that conflicts with their moral good ending. But why is Godhood the bad ending in the first place? Are there any exceptions to this? For that, let's delve into the plot. For this analysis, when I say good ending, I'm talking about the outcome that leads to the highest point of positive character growth in congruity with the story's theme. Likewise, the bad ending is when a character either repeals positive growth, succumbs to their character flaw, or embodies the negative belief that they otherwise would have shed in a good ending. But we'll get to the nuances of good and bad endings later. In stories where the antagonist ascends to godhood, or attempts to do so, the act of doing or striving for this is what the main cast is usually trying to prevent or undo. And, because of this, the act of pursuing godhood is written as an inherently negative, tyrannical, and selfish goal. This does make sense in the context of villains. After all, they're trying to wield immense power for the sake of, in most cases, ruling the world or fulfilling some other means of exerting control over others. Power is a key factor here, a power that mere mortals cannot grasp without losing their mortality and with it often their humanity. When godhood is written in this way, the divinity itself is implemented as a weapon that shields the character from consequences or vulnerability. Sometimes, though, this quest for godhood is born from good intentions, and nothing exemplifies this better than Persona 5 Royal's Takuto Maruki, Shujin Academy's local school counselor and part-time god aiming to rewrite the very fabric of reality. Maruki is fascinating, but if you've played the game or seen a single one of the myriad of video essays on the character, you already know that. Persona 5's vanilla ending had the cast fighting against, and you're never gonna guess this, a tyrannical god of control. A typical JRPG ending. Fight God, prove the will of humanity, and keep your free will and ability to make your own choices. But Royal's third semester truly encapsulates everything about the game's theme, and manifests it into a tragic character who reminds everyone of the difference between an antagonist and a villain. See, Maruki's goal is to create an idealized world where no one has to suffer. Yes, he'll essentially be the god of this new world, but he isn't doing this for godhood itself. He isn't even doing this for power. His goal stems from the surface-level desire to help people, which is rooted in the deeper need to escape his past suffering. And even here, letting this false reality ensue, while classified as the good ending, is a bad ending in terms of our earlier definitions of good and bad. He would not achieve the height of positive character growth in this alleged good ending because he would forever escape the reality where he would have to face his true internal conflict. Not to mention that accepting Maruku's reality does not grant you the true ending, further exemplifying how this good conclusion is nothing more than a flowery facade that denies reality, thus failing the theme and positive character growth. Godhood is, in a general sense of storytelling, the easy way out. The beauty of humanity comes from trying and failing and knowing fragility and mortality so it can empower you to do more. And that progression is null when there's nothing to learn, nothing to struggle against, and no ticking clock to remind you of just how finite every action is. There's a reason that many stories center around resisting the limits and alleged unfairness of mortal life, which is another place where this godhood trope pops up quite a bit. And a character who embodies this quite well is Gale of Waterdeep Dicarius from Baldur's Gate 3. In Gale's special interest of being the archetypical smart guy yearning for ever-expanding knowledge of magic and the weave, he ended up dating magic herself, Mystra. And in the pursuit of not respecting her boundaries or the boundaries of mortality, Gale sought to impress Mystra to such an extent where she would grant him the infinite and not mortal brain-compatible knowledge of the vast and conceptual mysteries of the weave. In doing so, a Netherese orb thought that his heart was perfect real estate and decided to plant itself as a ticking bomb in his chest, and also gave him a cool little tattoo while it was at it. Later on in the story, after learning that this orb was once part of an all-powerful crown of Karsus, an idea was presented to Gale. He might just be able to cure his condition with a healthy dose of hubristic godhood. After all, this is what Gale had been searching for. He's a scholar, a wizard, and a man with a chronic hyper-focus on pursuing knowledge and wisdom, which seems far more productive than a hyper-focused tunnel vision on playing Baldur's Gate 3 for 70 hours in 2 weeks. In trying to undo his hubristic mistake, he finally got the option to find answers to all the questions he could ever have. He'll never need to be curious about anything ever again. His life's pursuit of knowledge will be over. There won't be anything new for him to seek or strive for. He'll never need to struggle to overcome obstacles in his path. He'll lose the humanity that struggle in the unknown have to offer. This aspect of Gale's potential godhood ties in quite nicely with Maruki's supposed good ending as well. In both scenarios, the ascending character used their godhood as a way to avoid conflict and struggle. In Maruki's case, he wanted to create a world where no one would need to suffer, but in doing so would take away people's abilities to overcome their flaws and conflicts, and the ability to learn and grow from those messy attempts at overcoming roadblocks. Likening this to Gale, no wisdom can be gained if you snap away any problem before you, meaning that he does, in the end, fail to achieve a goal once closer to his heart than the Netherese orb. And speaking of using godhood to avoid your insecurities, let's talk about everyone's favorite video game vampire, Astarion. Yep, Astarion. That's who I meant to say. Astarion has, by far, the most nuanced and tightly written arc in the game, thanks, in no small part, to the phenomenal performance and script. In Astarion's arc, he gradually goes from a seductive pawn of his vampire lord Cazador to someone who learns to set boundaries for himself, respect the boundaries of others, or, well, like one character, and become his own person outside of the cruel control his vampire lord had on him. The primary cores for his character are power, freedom, and safety. In the need for safety, he must assure his freedom, but the quickest way to achieve this sense of freedom and security is power. This is how we form the want-need hierarchy. A character's want masks their need and allows them to try burying their need with the pursuit of a surface-level want, which is why we see Astarion focusing primarily on power and freedom, exercising those however he can until a major decision at the end of his arc where he confronts his tormentor of 200 years, Cazador Zar. Despite his character development, there remains a choice that will solidify the resolution and point of no return for Astarion's arc. He can either ascend to something close to vampiric godhood in Cazador's place, sacrificing 7,000 vampire spawn in the process, or he can finally break free of the cycle of cruelty by killing Cazador and remaining a spawn. During this confrontation with Cazador, Astarion says this:
"One last thrust, and I'll be free of you. I'll never have to fear you again. But if I finish the ritual you started, I'll never have to fear anyone. Ever."
And these lines truly embody the question of his arc, safety or power, fulfilling your want or your need, for both cannot coexist in harmony, as the want merely masks what the character truly needs, and almost tries to replace it in most cases. In this situation, becoming a vampire ascendant is simply a way that Astarion can fulfill his want by rendering his need impossible, meaning that he'll never have to deal with the insecurities that his need had. If he succumbs to the power he thinks will protect him, that will make him feel safe, he'll lose everything genuine about himself, would never be able to truly see others as equal, and would only get that sense of security through the ability to put people in their place rather than trust. In essence, becoming the next Cazador, and thus the cycle endures. He's failed his positive character growth. However, in his good ending, he's able to reflect and admit that he was dangerously close to becoming Cazador, that he would have become something unrecognizable. Whereas in his bad ending, he becomes emotionally abusive and snaps at you if you tell him that he's just the new Cazador. In this ascended version, if the player is romancing Astarion, he'll turn them into his spawn, a puppet, the thing that took his freedom in the first place. And this is where we get into the concept of moral good and bad endings versus physical good and bad endings. In nearly every godhood situation, the physical and moral endings will result in opposites. If Gale becomes the god of ambition, he reaches his physical good ending, being cured of the orb situation and, becoming a literal god, but reaches his moral bad ending, as he has disabled his ability to fulfill his highest point of positive character growth. Likewise, if Astarion kills Cazador and remains a spawn, he achieves his moral good ending, breaking the cycle of tyranny, but his physical bad ending, for he will never be able to walk in the sun, not to mention forfeiting the overpowered vampire abilities he could have otherwise attained. So then, is godhood ever the good ending? In a lot of cases, relinquishing godhood is the good ending, but what about earning back the godhood that you had lost? In the first Thor movie, Thor, god of thunder, is a reckless icon of hubris who puts people in danger because he's strong and can punch things with his godly godness, needing to be put in a mortality timeout by his father Odin until he can grow a moral compass and some humility. In this situation, Thor, having started the story as a god, presents the idea of godhood as the baseline status quo for his character. And because this status quo of godhood was the source of his initial flaw, Thor 1 is able to reverse this ascending to godhood trope by offering the problem and arc in reverse. Begin as a hubristic god, learn morality and humility through mortality, and earn the right to return to your prior godhood with the maturity required to wield it. It's a classic with great power comes great responsibility trope, and one of the few examples of a godhood character achieving both their moral and physical good endings, because the power itself was merely a tool, and not an entirely unique one at that. And this is, at least in my analysis, what differentiates this approach to a godhood story from ones where it serves as the moral bad ending. Rather than having the ability to impose ultimate control over the world and its inhabitants, as Maruki's godhood would have allowed him to do, Thor's godhood is the weather. But if that is the case, why do Astarion's vampire powers, which are not genuine godhood, give him the moral bad ending? Well, circumstance? Astarion's resolution is a moral point of no return. Becoming a vampire ascendant irrefutably undoes all of his prior character development and allows him to achieve his want while disregarding his need. Even though he cannot physically control other people or the world in the same way as a more typical god character, he still achieves immense power with the ultimate intent to use it to control people. But this is also down to placement. If Astarion had gone through with a similar ascension rite at the end of Act 1 and had to subsequently navigate what that meant through the rest of Acts 2 and 3, there could have still been a partial redemption. Same goes for if he started the game as an ascended vampire. But as it is, this was built up as the finale and resolution to his entire arc, meaning that it has the same narrative arc as a finale-based godhood decision. But then, does this mean that you can never redeem a godhood ascendant? It's complicated. And I wrote this before Season 2 of Arcane dropped, so there are going to be some parts added going forward. Back to Maruki, in the ending where you decide to fight back against his imposed perfect reality, he's already made his decision to become a god and rewrite reality. However, because he's an antagonist, we never get to influence his resolve because it's so strong throughout the game anyway. Joker can't just roll a dice with guidance, friends, charm, and 1,000 other dice modifiers to see if he can talk Maruki out of his driving motive and goal. Once Maruki is defeated in combat and his dreams quite literally crumble around him, he's forced to face the flaw and need he had been hiding behind a now fracturing want. The structure here is different from a protagonist's godhood decision, since Maruki has been building up to this perfect reality throughout a large portion of the game. The resolution comes down to whether or not he can achieve this goal, not whether or not godhood is an option he can take. Because this goal was always a mask over his need, seeing it finally collapse is what sparks the character's actual resolution and decision. Godhood was always his moral bad ending, but the resolution came down to whether or not he would realize and accept that fact. So, what does make Godhood the bad ending? With the final episode of Arcane, we get a really concise example of this. Victor has the theme of trying to overcome the limits of science and the human body, namely trying to use science and later magic to undo his disability. Later, this culminates in him essentially becoming a god and trying to pull everyone else into his perfected reality, but this is a reality entirely devoid of humanity. One version of Victor said something that I think perfectly sums up the entire theme of godhood being the bad ending.
But when every equation was solved, all that remained were fields of dreamless solitude. There is no prize to perfection, only an end to pursuit.
Struggle, whether it's in fiction or the real world, is how we grow. The frail and finite nature of mortality is what adds meaning to the actions we take. Perfection is inherently static and grows dull very quickly. If you're perfect at something the first time you do it, you'll never feel a sense of achievement because you won't progress. You won't have to fear failure, but you'll never be able to improve or create something new. Which is also why we should stop trying to replace humans in creative works with AI. Then again, any story is objectively improved with at least one hubristic wizard, so take that as you will. Happy writing. Bye! Somehow I didn't even talk about the game that originally sparked this video idea, but adding it in needlessly was just going to add another major spoiler warning, and I didn't want anyone who hadn't played it to have to wait like 3 years to actually be able to watch this video until they got to that game on their backlog. But I'm assuming a lot of you can guess which other game I was going to reference, given everything of my channel. What are your favorite or least favorite Godhood decisions in storytelling? Did you let the Baldur's Gate hubris boys ascend? Let me know in the comments. And with that, I think I'm going to go keep playing Metaphor. Bye!